You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, and Ashley Hardgrave. All right, on this episode, John Relyea goes inside the huddle. The Canadian-American bass spoke to us from Rome, where he just completed a run in the title role of Boito's Mefistofele. Little did he know that he would be bargaining with his own soul when he agreed to be interviewed by... Then, a field report from PJ on the Mets' Tannhäuser, and the Callis 100 countdown continues. Plus, tributes are flooding in for the late Marlena Malas. We'll share some with you in the 2-minute drill. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, by the way, on Spotify. You click follow. On Apple Podcasts, hit that plus sign. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, mailbag@operaboxscore.com. Even just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Say page on our website, operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you're going to get that OBS beer coaster, the OBS lapel pin, and the all-new #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot take. Get that holiday shopping done early, get your voice heard, and then pass on our merch to the person you love in your life. Matt Cummings, you are a tenor, but now you sound like a bass.
Yeah, so the thing about that is, don't get RSV, kids, because even if it's not going to kill you, it ain't fun. I haven't had a voice for like 2 weeks now, and I'm desperately hoping it comes back in time for Christmas gigs, so everyone out there, pray for me.
Sending good vibes and white light your way. Weston, do you need any help or assistance?
I've been trying to pitch up my voice to be Matt's backup.
There we go.
So it's not working so far. You know, I just have that sultry, sort of a romance novel audiobook reader kind of voice, and that's what people know me for.
Well, if you two swap, then Ashley, just don't change a thing.
No problem. That is something I can do. What is changing is the standings in the National Football League, because boy howdy, there were some crazy games this weekend. The Bears won for the second game in a row, which is something they haven't done in almost 2 years.
Shocking.
I'm as surprised as you are. It was very surprising. So that team won, and a lot of good teams did not. Very interesting season. And
I was going to say bizarre season, but
yes,
that's another way to put it.
I think you mean Bears are.
Oh, there it is.
There
yes.
it is, yeah.
And I was desperately hoping to get this guy on the show, but I will not divulge his name yet. But he posted on social media about the different probabilities and chances of different teams making the playoffs. And so, people like certain teams are in the 99%, and the Bears are on the board at 1%. So I just wrote back, so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, very nice. Well, raise your hand if you're having college football withdrawal. I certainly am in the Army-Navy game. That doesn't cut it. So no. New Year's cannot come soon enough. I'm ready for bowl games, and I am ready to take on Alabama on the collision course that is this
R.I.P.
show.
George.
Oh, dude, I cannot wait. Let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go inside the huddle.
Last Saturday, John Relyea was a guest on Oliver's other show and was tricked, or maybe seduced, into going inside the huddle for OBS. You can hear his quote-unquote professional interview on until December 22nd at WFMT.com, but you gotta hand it to Oliver for flirting so hard with a married man with 2 kids. And as you will soon hear, Oliver says he's always been a fan of the Canadian-American bass, whose career spans over 30 years. But here at OBS, we are all assuming Oliver's fandom was reignited when Relyea appeared bare-chested as the ghost in last season's Met HD broadcast of Brett Dean's Hamlet. Before we dive into the conversation, however, here is a little bit of John Relyea singing the aria of the Gravedigger from Hamlet.
Well, I would count King Philip and Don Carlos as another one of your great roles, but how do you decide if you're going to sing the Inquisitor or if you're going to sing Philip when you are getting these contracts?
It's
like whoever has the darker voice gets to be the Inquisitor.
Well, that's usually me, but this is an interesting thing about basses. A lot of my reference to when I listen to a role and I get ideas about it, and I go back and listen to early recordings. More often than not, the further back you go, the darker the trend seems to be in terms of vocal color for the basses, and I'm not sure why that is, but getting back to my teacher Jerome Hines, the legendary bass, he was a very, very dark voice, but he also talked about the change, I guess you could say, in the vocal color trend, I guess you could say, but I think it was probably more relative to training style. But he said that, what did he say? The baritones of yesterday sounded like the basses of today. So, like, if you could go back and hear, let's take George London, for example. If you were to really listen to him nowadays, you would almost say that's a true bass until you heard him go up into his very top notes. Then you'd be like, oh, okay, he's a bass baritone, but by a different definition. So, I definitely now, in this particular portion of my life, I have a much darker color. And, if we're talking, in traditional terms, yes, I would probably sing the Inquisitor quite often, because you could end up, with a Filippo that has a more brighter colors, more lyric leaning kind of voice. And you could say that the Inquisitor needs to completely overpower King Philip in their confrontation scene, the famous scene. And I did sing the Inquisitor along with Gunter Greusbach's Filippo at the Met, and we're both pretty dark in terms of our vocal colors, and that in itself can be quite exciting too, because you have what feels like two very equal forces, confronting each other and resisting. So I think the rules are pretty flexible. And of course, from a perspective of what I would prefer to sing most of the time, it would be Philip. But the feeling of singing the Inquisitor is also it's a great feeling of power that you can really relish on stage. So I've very much enjoyed that. But sort of these days now I'm really moving into singing King Philip. So I did that at Covent Garden, and I did it at the Bayerische Staatsoper, like within a couple of weeks of each other, incidentally, this last summer. But it's cool when you see that scene from both sides, because then you can play off of each other even better. It's sort of like when people trade the roles of Don Giovanni and Leporello. It's a great way to understand how the energy passes between the characters.
Günter Greusbach is a very good-looking guy, and you're also a very good-looking guy. Like, I think your images are your headshots, whatever, like very striking. You know, you got the black hair and like the steel blue eyes and whatnot. And so to put you in that makeup for Inquisitor is such a waste.
I was the ugliest I think I've been on stage, maybe in my whole career. It was a cool makeup job though, because they were using film quality, bald caps and things that really you couldn't see it a lot. It really looked like my real scalp and all this, but it was pretty alarming to look in a mirror even. But it's fun because then you look in the mirror and you see that guy and you start to become him. You know, it's very easy segue from there.
Yeah. Well, but with Philip specifically, I'm thinking about casting directors and how they have to deal with the problem of John Relyea being too good looking. And you have to find a Carlo who is, looks younger than you and who could potentially be your son. And be more desirable than you for Elizabeth,
Well, I had some pretty handsome guys singing in the last two Don Carlo productions. I was Filippo, and we had Brian Jade at Covent Garden, and then we had my good old friend Charles Castronovo.
Okay, I'll give it to Charlie. For sure, Charlie is better looking than you, but I don't know about Brian.
Anyway, yeah.
Can you talk to me about eating mushrooms and dying as Boris in Lady Macbeth? I know this is going to make my co-host Weston very happy. He loves that opera, and we're going to put this video of you either on our webpage or somewhere. It's so good, and like with I mean, if you watch The Last of Us, this show about cordyceps.
Yeah, that's right.
Very timely.
Oh, good Lord. Good thing I didn't turn into one of those things. Yeah, it's an amazing series, I ought to say. I loved it. But I'm also like a fan of Walking Dead series. I watched that whole thing. So I'm into the cheap zombie stuff too. So, but yeah, that's oh God, talk about a character you hate but love to perform. Yeah, Boris Timofeyevich is just a scumbag to the highest order. But I loved playing him, because he's just again, like, I like to go into these characters that have these deeply flawed interiors, and he's about as dysfunctional as it gets. He's trying to get with his daughter-in-law while his son is away, and he's I guess we can safely say he's a pretty major drunk. And he has no shame. So I just kind of went all in on that, because interestingly with that piece is there are no good guys. I mean, everybody is majorly flawed. But he, I would say, without a doubt, is kind of the darkest, most criminal character. Even though he's not the one who commits murder, I think, you could say he's probably a rapist and all that. So that's fair to say. He's just as bad as everybody else. And I guess you kind of have to really make him the ultimate, the ultimate scumbag. I keep saying that, but that's just the right from the minute I read through the libretto and heard the recording, I go, oh my God, this guy is just awful. So it was a bit, it felt a bit like an exorcism playing him. I don't know. It was really just wow. But also just that score is just brilliant. It's so genius. because he goes between serious and satire in such a seamless way that it's just truly brilliant.
Nie принесу. Что? Ты сказала? Ты смеешь? Смеешь? Шлюха! Что со мной? Крепко, значит, ночь моя. Папа, мой головка светлая приходит. Жар, точно пожар, я много крови нагрешил. Папа, сюда, Боже,
A couple weeks ago, we had Francesca Zambello on, and we were discussing the birth of the Barahunk. And, I feel like this revival or this American debut of Brett Dean's Hamlet was sort of made for me because I ended up really liking the overall show. I don't know if I want to listen to it like as an opera, but like as a show, it was super engaging. And really Alan Clayton, I mean, the whole cast was Brenda Ray.
Oh, Alan is a force of nature. He is,
and like
he's a phenomenon.
The twin countertenors, like there were so many great touches that just kept me engaged the whole time. And I do want to ask you about Alan, but I also want to ask you about, did you feel like you needed to do extra push-ups or like, I'm going to be on a diet while I'm in this show?
Yeah, I had to bulk up. I think is sort of what I did.
Did they paint abs on you, or are those your abs?
Oh, I must have been flexing there. I mean, they miraculously appeared. That was, I think, maybe the first or second time I'd actually just been bare upper body for anything. Somehow I avoided that for most of my career, but so I saw the video of it, and
now it's an HD.
Yeah,
making gay boys all over the world so happy.
Well, I mean, it's definitely me trying to impress through middle age.
Yeah.
So there we are.
But talk to me about Alan, because I'm just blown away by this guy. I mean, he's like an athlete and he's a lunatic.
Yeah. No, he's a perfect example of the ultimate singer actor, I would say. The two are not separate. With him, he's completely unified as a singer and an actor. It's he's almost a chameleon in terms of even his tenor Fach, because you have moments where he sings and it sounds like, Peter Pears or somebody like that. And then he can really open it up and you're almost in Vickers territory. So, that was, there's so many layers that he can bring out in terms of his acting right into his voice and vice versa. And I saw that again when I saw his Peter Grimes. I couldn't wait to see that because I knew right away, he'd be the ultimate Peter
perfect
Grimes,
for it. Yeah.
Which he really is. So he's, if I was talking to any young singer and I wanted to just sum up what an ultimate artist is in this art form, I would say he'd be up at the top of the list and say, tell them, just go watch him perform, because you know, it makes you really respect, you know, true stagecraft as well as great singing at the same time.
Well, I'm going to spring a surprise question on you, and I'm going to say it slowly so you have time to think about it. But here at Opera Box Score, we are celebrating the centennial of Maria Callas by counting down the 100 greatest. And you could fill in the blank. It could be a picture. It could be a video. It could be a recording. It could be a career event. It could be a quote. It could be an anecdote. It could be anything that you could think of when you think of Maria Callas. What is one or two of the things that you think about that made her not even great, but made her who she is from Maria Callas's career?
Well, the biggest impression, the first one really, was that Paris concert.
58, the one where she's wearing a super beautiful gown and like lots of
and
ice.
She even sings Una voce poco fa.
Yeah.
And it's that one blew me away. I didn't, you know, this was one of the first things my dad showed me of you know, his favorite things with opera singers, and that I thought was amazing. And I remember at one point she's trying to continue with the next phrase, and you hear a guy out in the audience trying to scream a bravo, and it sounds like someone's tackling him so she can go on, you know. But it's like that too. It's like what I was, you know, thinking of when people are so naturally unified as, you know, singers and actors. And in that video, she really had it there.
Well, the audience is going to be so tired of me telling this story, but when she sings Costa Diva, the chorus comes in all wrong, all sorts of wrong. And she's just like, she gets this look on her face like, okay, how are we going to fix this? And she gives a downbeat for when they're tutti, and it gets everybody on track. And it's like she doesn't miss a step. And it's so incredible.
Wow. Yeah. Seriously intelligent singer too.
Well, John Relyea, I have been a fan of yours for so many years now, and I'm so glad I finally got a chance to meet you. And I'm looking forward to your performance at the Messiah.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
You heard two clips in that interview, the Grand Inquisitor scene with Günter Groisbock as King Philip from last year's Don Carlo at the Met, conducted by Carlo Rizzi. And then you heard the Poison Mushroom scene from Lady Macbeth of Betsensk with soprano Svetlana Sotstalieva, also from last season at the Met, conducted by friend of the show, Carrie Lynn Wilson. As promised, you can watch The Death of Boris Timofeyevich on the webpage for this episode at operaboxscore.com. Thanks again to John Relyea, and thanks to the PR team at Chicago Symphony Orchestra, where John will be the bass soloist in Handel's Messiah later this month.
And you don't want to miss a moment of the action on the OBS. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify. Click follow. On Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. Well, the Bears have 2 wins in a row. Get this. The OBS fantasy football team in the Opera Philadelphia League has also had only a single example the entire season when we won back-to-back games. I personally blame Yahoo.com's auto draft function and /or Tobias Wright.
Have you ever seen them in the same room together? I think they might be one and the same, George.
They most certainly have never been in the same room together because I'm the guy who's been running the auto draft. Never again. Not going to do that ever again.
His middle name is Parks, for those of you who are following along and are desperate to know the full name from last week's episode.
I was.
Yeah, you got something to say? Then yeah, all right, you can say something. This is Listener Mailbag.
PJ checks in from the Met and the recent production of Tannhäuser.
Hello, Opera Box Score. Hello, Listener Mailbag. It's PJ and Donald.
Hello there.
Now, I've been misinformed, Donald. All these years, I thought it was Tannhäuser. So I've been saying Tannhäuser my entire life.
Umlaut.
You and your umlauts. You know, I was corrected walking into the opera house by the guy directing traffic, pointing out that I was saying it the wrong way.
That's true.
Did not start out well. And the other thing is, we're not done. This is the intermission between the first and second.
Yeah,
There's more?
We got 2 hours of music left.
Dear God. I was thinking like an hour and done. This is craziness.
It's 8:20. We won't get out of here, actually, between this intermission and the next one. We won't get out of here till about 20 after 11.
Dear Lord, I had no idea. And the other thing I want to point out was the conductor was not installed. The orchestra was waiting patiently. There was a titter of applause as things were starting to happen.
Yeah.
And you were shushed.
I was shushed by somebody 2 rows in front.
Yes.
All I said was, "Do you want to move over into the empty seat?"
You're like, and you're trying to be kind, PJ. You need a little more room, and you were shushed, and nothing was going on. What kind of crowd is this New York opera group?
The Wagnerites.
This is a sneakers and sweaters and scruffy old coats kind of crowd.
No, you've seen me. There was a woman over there.
I saw her. She's the exception. She caught my eye, Donald. But overall, it's a very scruffy.
Well, when you come to Wagner, you've got to dress for comfort.
Okay. Yes.
You're going to be sitting a long time.
I'm learning that the hard way.
You know what Birgit Nilsson used to say? They used to ask her, "How do you sing Isolde?" And she used to say, "A comfortable fair pair of shoes."
All right, let's talk a little bit about the production and leave these poor people in peace.
This is the oldest production currently active in the Met. It's 45 years old. It's a beautiful production. It's amazing it survived this long. I saw this production when it was new.
Wow.
I've seen it at least 7 or 8 times.
And you're still with us. You're so old.
I'm still alive. I know. But I was young when it was new. I was young.
You were new.
Now it's old and I'm older. Tannhäuser is a fascinating opera. It's sort of the Macbeth of Wagner. And when I say Macbeth, I mean Verdi's Macbeth, which was written in 1847 but extensively revised in 1864. Tannhäuser was written in 1844, I believe, or 1845, and extensively rewritten for the Paris Opera in 1864. But the music in the first act, a lot of it is very Tristan-esque. If you know the music, it's jarring, but it's beautiful. It's probably his most lyrical opera for sheer beauty of the music. And it's also the most difficult tenor role he ever wrote. Wow. Tannhäuser is virtually unsingable.
What do you think of the singing
Very
so far?
good. Very good.
Who do we have?
Well, we had Andreas Schager, who's an Austrian Helden tenor, dramatic tenor. He's the Tannhäuser. We have Christian Geraher, Georg Zeppenfeld, who's the Landgrave Hermann. He's the local duke-like. And then we, in the next act, we'll have Elsa Vandenhever as Elizabeth, the love interest. She's Tannhäuser's love interest. But in the first act, we had the Russian mezzo Ekaterina Gubanova as Venus. And it's also another interesting role because it lies very high. And she's a magnificent singer.
But who stole the show?
Our boy.
He's
Lebu.
not ours, but we want to call him ours. He was a big winner in the Giulio Gari Foundation.
He was our second place winner, and it's a fabulous voice, and he's going to have a very big career.
What a thrill to see him on the big stage.
Yes.
A lovely guy.
It's a smaller role, but he's working his way up.
He's a younger singer.
He's a young singer. I think he's about 28 now, 29.
Lebu.
Yeah.
It's PJ, it's Donald, it's the intermission at the Metropolitan Opera here at Tannhäuser. We love talking to all of you on Opera Box Score. We'll see you again.
Bye-bye.
I feel like PJ didn't get the full experience. He missed out on the protesters shouting over Wolfram Springsteen. So can we really trust his opinion is what I'm saying.
Well, he didn't get the whole package, right? Exactly.
Yeah. May I have your attention, please? This is the Callus Countdown to 100.
Callus Countdown continues. It's called alliteration, everybody. The 100 best moments of Callus's career. Number 97, we throw it over to Weston.
Well, you say Weston, but it's really Oliver, because as we have firmly established, I was raised in a Sutherland-only family, so I know nothing about Callus. But I am learning along with you, our dear listener. So this is from Oliver. As you heard in his interview with John Relyea, the 1958 Paris concert will be providing us with many items on this countdown. Number 97 is a moment from the performance of Casta Diva. One can imagine that the chorus for this concert was comprised of amateur singers and was probably so overwhelmed by the occasion or by the spell that Callas casts in this aria that they botched their first entrance, which you'll be able to hear in this clip. Callas hides her dismay gracefully and gives a clear gesture at the tutti, indicating, never mind all that. Here is where you come in, and sings the most rhythmically accurate and articulated gruppetti to get everyone back on track without breaking the spell for the audience. Let's hear that clip.
And now for my first appearance on the Callas Countdown. Oh my God. I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
The first of many.
I was so inspired by Ashley's submission last week that I decided to dig down into the archives a little bit for another Elvira clip. This is the Elvira, though, that started it all. So picture it, folks. The year is 1949, and Tullio Serafin is in search for a new Elvira for a new production of Il Puritani after the soprano Margherita Carrozio has fallen ill. So Serafin's wife hears a voice singing through the score of Puritani for fun. And that voice is Maria Callas, who is taking a break from her run of Brunhildes to sight read a bel canto coloratura heroine. And, you know, Serafin's wife takes her to sing for the maestro, and she bluffs her way through the score, sight reading for him at times. And he hires her to learn the part in a week. That part has so many notes to learn in 1 week. And this is not just any week. This is a week during which she has 3 more performances of Brunhilde to get through.
I can't.
And, you know, people at the time were skeptical that this was going to work. They were scornful even. They talked about, you know, like baritones who were going to be singing Violetta next. But the fact that it was such a smash hit success, I think is a really key moment in the formation of not just Maria Callas, but like the legend of Maria Callas, that she could sing anything. And that not only could she sing anything, she could sing like the 2 polar opposites of what the voice is asked to do within the same week. And that she was just such a musical sponge. She spent all that time at the conservatoire, you know, learning about the art of music, that she could just like absolutely devour these scores. And it also signals, you know, the beginning of her move from exclusively dramatic soprano repertoire towards all like mixing in a decent amount of the dramatic coloratura and bel canto rep as well. And I want to commemorate this, you know, this moment with 2 clips from her debut studio recording. This was an EP recital from Cetra in 1949, so the same year that this happened. This is, you know, more or less what she would have been singing like at the time. This is before her big EMI contract, so the sound is definitely not quite as warm as you would get used to from future mono recordings. But that recital has 3 tracks. It has the Casta Diva Scena, including Cabaletta. It has Isolde's Liebestod in Italian, and it has the Elvira Mad Scene. So, since we heard a little bit of the Elvira last week, where I would like to start with, well, the first thing you're going to hear is a clip of the Liebestod, which is not Brunhilde, but is pretty close. It's as close as you're going to get from her recordings. And then it's going to segue into, from the same recital disc, the end of the Cabaletta from the Puritani.
Callis countdown continues throughout the entire year, heading towards December of 2024. Send us that voice memo or email us your hot takes with your Callis moment. It goes to mailbag@operaboxscore.com, or even just record your thoughts using the You Got Something to Pay page on our website, operaboxscore.com.
Pay and say. Do
Pay
both.
and say. Hey,
Yes.
2 for 1. It's great. The 2-minute drill is next. The 2-minute drill is now.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
It's a big week for the concept of Italian opera singing, and I'm not just talking about Maria Callas singing Liebestod in Italian. The Italian opera singing as a concept has joined UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage alongside pizza making. UNESCO celebrated the art form as a physiologically controlled way of singing that enhances the carrying power of the voice in acoustic spaces. It is a means of free expression and intergenerational dialogue, with its cultural value recognized at national and international levels. Tough luck for Germany and France, but better luck next year.
Rumors of opera consultant Matthew Epstein's death are greatly exaggerated, according to Catherine Maffitano. The soprano contradicted earlier reporting from Slipped Disc and said that Epstein is, quote, alive but unconscious in the hospital undergoing testing. His vitals are stable, but his prognosis is unknown. In the meantime, please let us refrain from further speculation, as there are no definitive answers yet. You heard her, folks.
English National Opera is officially relocating its home base to Greater Manchester by 2029 in a tough blow to open letter writers across the United Kingdom. Said Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, ENO is one of the most exciting cultural institutions in the country. We've worked closely with them to set out a shared vision of a future in our city region where they can continue making groundbreaking opera, foster new collaborations with artists across the north, and bring their award-winning learning and well-being programs to communities here.
Finnish National Opera is under fire as more than 10 women have described dozens of instances of harassment taking place at the company, including groping, commenting on body parts, and explicit text messages. General Director Gita Kadambi admitted that there had been several incidents of harassment at the Opera House over the past few years, adding the same few people are responsible. Quote, the most important thing is for people to speak up and step in when it comes to harassment, says Kadambi.
Operamoto is the first sponsor of a new online directory of trans, non-binary, and gender-diverse opera and classical voice professionals. In a joint statement, True Voice Award winner Catherine Goforth, Operamoto Executive Director Danielle Wright, Beyond Travesti podcaster Bryce McClendon, and Opera American Sphinx leader Dorian Block expressed support for the initiative. Quote, historically, they haven't been invited to participate in classical music. Our goal is to change that.
It's a major award. Boston Lyric Opera's film Svadba has won the top prize for artistic creation in Opera America's 2023 Digital Excellence in Opera Awards. The opera film, adapted from Serbian composer and librettist Ana Sokolović's a cappella score for 6 women, was directed by Shura Baryshnikov. San Francisco Opera's In Song also received recognition for education and enrichment materials.
In trade news, Hanover State Opera has named Bodo Busse as its next intendant starting in 2025. And Welsh National Opera has announced Christopher Barron as interim general director. He'll take over in January for retiring general director Aidan Lang.
Exit stage right, mezzo-soprano and highly sought-after voice teacher Marlena Malas, who's passed away at 87. Malas was a longtime faculty member of the Manhattan School of Music, the Juilliard School, and the Curtis Institute of Music, and taught at numerous opera companies in addition to chairing the voice department of the Chautauqua Institution since 1979.
Conductor Robert Hart Baker has died at the age of 69. Baker served as the music director of the St. Louis Philharmonic over 38 years and also worked in opera at the Festival dei Due Mondi and Spoleto Festival USA.
And on this day, December 11th, 1669, saw the birth of Italian librettist Apostolo Zeno in Venice. French composer Hector Berlioz was born in 1803 in Côte Saint-André. Polish tenor Hans Rudiger, who sang in the premieres of Salome and Rosenkavalier, was born in 1862. 1892 saw the birth of Italian tenor Giacomo Lauri Volpi in Rome. And 7 years later, 1899, Swiss tenor joined him. Max Maily was born. 1906 saw the birth of Italian soprano Sara Scuderi. And one for Weston, the American composer and teacher Elliot Carter was born on this day in 1908. A couple more for Weston as we move from birthdays over to premieres. As we look at Alban Berg's Lulu, had its first performance in Vienna in 1935, and Philip Glass and Robert Moran's opera The Juniper Tree, which premiered in 1985.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Nessun dorma, nessun dorma. Tu pure, o principessa, nella tua fredda stanza, guardi le stelle che tremano d'amore e di speranza. Ma il mio mistero è chiuso in me, il nome mio nessun saprà, nana, sulla tua bocca la dirò, quando la luce
You just heard the Italian tenor Giacomo Lauri Volpi in an audio recording, which is probably from the 1920s or 30s. I wasn't able to confirm exactly when it was taken, but that was a clip of the aria, of course, Nessun Dorma from Turandot. Lauri Volpi was an Italian tenor. He was known for his range and his technical security, and you can definitely hear that come through, even in that old recording, like that clarion clear sound of his tenor just like really cuts through a lot of the noise that you can hear in some of those old recordings and like sounds pretty modern even. And as a fun coincidence, he was actually the Kalaf in the American premiere of Turandot at the Met.
Oh, that's cool.
Crazy. Couple big stories this week. We're going to hold on to those till the end of the drill. We're going to start at the end with the death of Marlena Malas and her career. Matt, help us get to know a little bit about Marlena.
Marlena Malas was kind of like the voice teacher. Like she has just been such, like she's been a monument of the vocal industry for decades. She was a graduate of Juilliard and Curtis in the 50s and 60s and sang for a time as a mezzo-soprano with, you know, New York City Opera, Santa Fe Opera, Boston Opera, Miami, and other companies as well. But she really found her own as an instructor of young singers. And there are so many tributes to her that have poured out across social media, and from the many institutions that she was affiliated with, which just really speak to how big of a loss this is for the singing community, both in terms of her technical skill as a teacher, but also her warmth with her students, her encouragement, and her ability to hear past just technique and also make sure that she's focusing on communication and that the student is being empowered to express something, to have something to say, to communicate both the text and the music on not taking anything away from the beauty of tone. But so that those elements really are all working together. She loved teaching. She continued teaching as she battled cancer 4 separate times. And she talks about, you know, working with students as saying, I'm listening to if they have something to say, if they have something to sing about. And I think that really comes through in in many of the tributes to her that we can read just a couple of excerpts from. She was praised by Craig Rutenberg, the coach from the Met, as the best voice teacher I have known in 60 years, and I've been around all the voice teachers.
Yeah.
Lucas Meacham, the baritone, he wrote, my cherished voice teacher, Marlena Malas, has passed away. The void left I cannot define. She cared so much for her students and for tirelessly spreading her knowledge about singing. She did so much for so many. I personally owe her so much. What she gave us in her presence and love was invaluable. She is an irreplaceable figure in my life. Rest peacefully. I think that really sums up a lot of the spirit of these tributes. And, you know, this is a teaching career that includes many generations of top singers, even, you know, Susan Graham studied with her. Tatiana Troiano studied with her.
Oh, damn.
Nancy Gustafson, Judith Haddon, Neil Schickoff. Like, those are all people whose careers are in their twilight if they still have them as singers. And they studied with Marlena. You know, also singers like Nicole Cabell and Brandon Jovanovich, Jarrett Ott, you know, the Lucas Meacham and Brandon Siddell that we just talked about, like many others. Like, it would be impossible to list all of her students. Those are just some of the names that popped up in the tributes to her. And those are singers who sang, you know, at the very top level of this field.
I remember the summer that I was at the Chautauqua Institute as I was teaching the other part of the program, not under Marlena, but I did get to chat with her and was totally starstruck, and she had a way of kind of putting you at ease. I think the figures show that she probably taught some 2,000 students across all experience levels since 79.
And that's just at Chautauqua.
Just at Chautauqua. Ashley, am I right that you studied with her as well?
I got to meet her about once a year for a decade, and I got to do a master class with her. It's funny, I as you were reading those tributes, I found myself like, oh no, now I have to talk next, and I'm not sure I can, because I got the privilege of seeing like the pinnacles of her teaching sort of manifesting right in like this super meaty part of this teaching experience she had, because a lot of those singers that you listed off, Judith Haddon, Susan Graham, Richard Stillwell's another one. Those were that's my pedigree. Those are my teachers. Those are people that I worked with. Yeah. And, you know, the Chicago stop on the Chautauqua audition tour was always at my institution where I worked, or where I was a graduate student, and then I was an employee. So it was, you know, it was Marlena week. We always knew when Marlena was coming. It was really exciting. And she was, and you know, the stories you hear about her warmth that they're 100% genuine. Those sort of rumors are absolutely true. On top of all of the, incredible instruction that she gave, that you hear about the singers that she was their teacher and she worked with as sort of like a long running project. But I can also attest to the impact that she makes in sort of an instantaneous one moment, masterclass sort of instruction. And she had the ability to make change and make really beautiful art, even just with that sort of one interaction. I remember that I was selected to sing in a masterclass for her on one of these visits. And I didn't quite realize exactly who she was. I've mentioned before, when I first came into grad school, I was a little bit of an idiot when it came to like the culture of opera. I just knew I liked it and was kind of good at it, and they were going to let me. So I showed up and went to graduate school. But as I started to learn and understand, the more nervous I got, and I was terrified, because I'm looking at this roster of people that they've chosen to sing, and it was a lot of the heavy hitters and then like me. And so I felt, incredible fish out of water. I felt really uncomfortable. I was scared to death. I was going to be singing in French for her, which is my worst freaking language. I was like, this is a recipe for disaster. We come in that day, and of course it's Marlena Malas. She's coming to teach. So like everybody in their brother and dog and nephew were coming in, because this is something like everybody wanted to watch her work, because it was art and it was beauty and it was creation. And so, I am now in my 40s. I'm still a ball of anxiety. So just go back 20 years with less life experience and just imagine like what my brain was going through as I'm waiting to go up and sing for this person. And it was all coming to a head. And I just remember I almost left my body because I was so afraid. She didn't do anything to make me afraid. I just was, because it's like it's this famous person, and I'm here, and I don't feel like I deserve to be here. And so I get up and I start to sing, and she's watching me, and I get through it, but not great. It was okay. It wasn't great. And so she walks directly up to me, and she puts her hands on either side of my shoulders, kind of like on my upper arms. And she goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." And she looked me dead in the eyes, and she just exhaled and goes, "It's okay." And my whole body changed. I will never forget that moment. Like, my whole body changed in that moment. Like, Marlena Malas is touching me and she's telling me it's okay. All right, let's try this again. And there were other like really special moments from that, masterclass that I got to have with her, but that in that moment, that warmth, that transfer of energy where she let me know that it was okay. It was okay to make music. It was okay to be a human and be scared. It meant a lot.
Yeah. Marlena Malas, rest in peace. There's no delicate way, I don't think, to transition to one of the other stories in the drill, which was about the alleged passing of Matthew Epstein, which at the moment is not, in fact, true. There's a little bit
for Pete's sake.
Behind this. Norman Lebrecht, the British music critic who runs the
Don't
website,
give him clicks, folks.
Slipped disc.
Please don't.
There's debate within this show about the value and virtue, but the website
definitely
got it
not about
completely
this
wrong.
story.
Not about this story. No, where the website posted that Matthew Epstein had committed suicide. Then Kathy Malfitano pipes up and is like, "No, that's not true. Please be generous and most of all quiet while we let this thing play out." Epstein, of course, artistic director at Lyric Opera of Chicago from 1999 to 2005.
Well, and you know what was weird about this is like the two major singers that you heard the tail ends of this story from. Initially, the news was quote unquote breaking that this thing had happened, which we know has not happened, from Neil Rosenshine. So he was the first person. And then here comes Kathy Malfitano being like, "Nope, the rumors aren't true." So I just thought, in addition to the calamity and the possible tragedy of this news, was like, it started with Neil Rosenshine, it ended with Kathy Malfitano.
It's a big week for New York conservatory voice teachers.
Oh, Lord Jesus.
David Mamet has a famous play called Glengarry Glen Ross, which was about these real estate salesmen. And one of the famous lines from that play is, "You never open your mouth till you know what the shot is." And that applies here. It's like, Do not put it out there.
George, that was the most "I'm a director" piece of wisdom I've ever heard in my life.
That's why they pay me the big bucks, man.
I'm honestly still waiting for his classical music sequel, Glengarry Glen Gould.
How dare you?
Be so amazing.
Love that.
This is so. It's just so frustrating that like a website could generate such absolute lies, and that
this is one of the things that I feel like is so important to think about when you're talking about any sort of niche community like opera. Like sometimes I wake
sports,
up.
Dare you say?
Go on.
Well, I wake up. I wake up in like in a sweat in the middle of the night sometimes, thinking that, oh no, I'm one of the foremost known authorities in the opera world for people to understand what's going on in the opera. That's a concerning thing to think about, especially when you lose like all these legacy, more reputable media institutions like Opera News and stuff like that. And, you know, slipped disc, often wrong,
and always spiteful.
Always spiteful for no reason.
That's their tagline. Often wrong, always spiteful.
It's a great tagline. Oliver, bless his soul, not on the show this week, cannot stand. He won't even mention the name of the website.
And we're seeing why in real time.
He ain't wrong.
Exactly. One of the stories that is in fact true this week is that English National Opera has finally decided to move out of London and is moving to Manchester by 2029.
They're waving the white flag at that Coliseum. Ace has won.
My condolences, George.
I know. This story has been going on for months and years now, and this is just it's so disappointing. It's so crushing, and no one is happy. Like Manchester isn't happy because they don't. I don't know how opera is going to really like change the lay of the land there. Leeds isn't happy because Opera North is there. It's less than an hour's drive away, so they're happy.
It's
London
a long way
happy.
for a Brit to drive.
Maybe
George.
so.
That's true.
Yeah, it's on all those B roads. London's not happy because they've lost this opera house. Now, I will say, Manchester, until this shift, was the biggest city in Europe without a resident opera company. And yes, that does speak for something.
We're going to have to figure out what the new biggest city without an opera company becomes in 2029.
That's
true.
Gentlemen, to your Wikipedias.
We'll never know. It's so disappointing. It's so frustrating. Like, nobody is happy. And this idea that E&O is going to retain the Coliseum and somehow they're still going to turn a profit on the Coliseum in London, despite them not being there, that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah. The whole thing is such a mess, and I think more indicative of a greater disdain for culture in a lot of, particularly right-wing governmental institutions around the world. And this is a problem that is everywhere. Like I've said a million times before, a lot of this feels kind of like child's play to an American. Like, it's like, oh, you still get some funding from Arts Council England, like brag. But, it really is, everything that's been happening in England over this has been just the worst to see. And
it's brought up
like
the
I say every
absolute
time,
worst in everybody.
Yeah. Like I say every time, you like, if you have the ability to fight, if you're listening from across the pond, fight it, because, we're here on the other side of that in the US, and it doesn't get better or by itself.
Weston, it makes me want to eat a pizza.
It does, George. There's the transition. I love this little story. Let's end this on a fun little note. So the UNESCO has, obviously they have their big, UNESCO World Heritage sites but they also have these cultural heritage things, which does include the act of making pizza. And now finally, at long last, Italian opera singing specifically, which I think is so funny. Now, this is actually kind of an interesting one to me because it's very vague and I haven't been able to ascertain exactly what they mean by Italian. I think they're talking about bel canto style specifically.
I think they're just talking about the fact that opera as a as an art form is considered to
Yeah.
be birthed from Italy. So
Right.
that is the best place to honor, because many of the quotes talk about, the cradle of opera with these, in these salons and the Baroque composers that Oliver loves, like Monteverdi and others, and how they kind of created it from scratch. So I think that's why Italians are getting the credit
I think
for
so,
having
too.
quote unquote invented it. I do just want to read some of the other Italian practices that are already on that
absolutely.
list,
Here
which
we
is
go.
it's in addition to Sardinian tenor singing, not just Italian opera singing,
right,
but
okay.
Sardinian
Specific.
tenors specifically, the art of the Mediterranean diet, and the art of glass beads. And according to The Guardian, they also tried to get Italian espresso on the list last year, and
come
UNESCO said that was a bridge too
That was-
far.
It's under the list of intangible cultural heritage. Like pizza, like I can touch and smell, but sound, like I can't even see. So I don't understand. I don't understand how this is going to work. I love it. UNESCO. Now there's some big money. Let's wrap this show up.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Oh, it's been an up and down hour together. Wow. Man, this is why we do it. Good call, bad call. To wrap things up, we're going to start with Weston Williams.
My good call is the nose at Chicago Opera Theater last week. I am so sad I cannot recommend our listeners to go see it next week because it was only 2 performances, which is, I think, the true tragedy of the lack of funding for a post-pandemic opera world. But it was a great performance. Francesca Zambello did a fantastic job directing. I have to talk a little bit about Alexei Bogdanov in the lead role. What a voice! Every time I hear him.
It was a titanic performance. Like
It was, it is such a hard role. It is a brutal role. And you could hear him crystal clear. There was one point like in the first act where he went down into like almost a growl. And I could not conceive of how it projected that far in that space. And then, of course, friend of the show, Lydia Yankovskaya, her final performance as music director with Chicago Opera Theater, which made me extremely sad. But man, it was on a level of conducting that, like, the way she has brought this orchestra to the state it is now is truly one of the most exciting journeys I've seen since I first arrived in Chicago. The orchestra that I first saw when I came to Chicago Opera Theater in 2016 was not capable of the performance I saw last week. And it was a phenomenal show. I know some people might be a little bit divided on the opera itself, but those people are wrong. And I loved every second of it.
Matt Cummings.
I mean, I heartily agree. That I also went to see The Nose. I saw both Weston and The Nose on Friday.
You saw Weston's Nose.
And Oliver was there too. And I just thought
Amazing.
the production was stupendous. Like I only knew that the opera was weird. And it surely is, but it is weird in such an engaging way where, like the satire is so outrageous that you just have to go along for the ride, and what a glorious ride it is. And in particular, what I loved about this production is just how many young singers got a chance to show off here and there.
Yeah.
I thought that in particular, Quinn Middleman, Sam Crosby, Corinne Costell and Brian Pember really made the most of their moments on stage and gave really, really fun and really impressive vocal performances as well. And linguistic too. Brian Pember in particular had this moment where they had to spit out the most insane Russian patter you've ever heard in your entire life, and every syllable was just right there, not a stutter to be heard. And incredible props as well to what Lydia Yankovskaya was able to achieve with both the singers and the orchestra. The percussion writing in that score is so intricate, and it was just it was really tight. I was really, really impressed.
Ashley Hardgrave.
And what I have now decided is going to be a segment for December, Ashley's Holiday Album Recs. They continue. Last week, I mentioned A Christmas Gift for You from Phil Spector. Don't knock it. It's a great album.
A classic.
This time, I would like to move on to the catalog, of James Brown holiday albums.
Yes.
So my personal favorite, although feels controversial for some folks, holiday song is Santa Claus Goes Straight to the Ghetto, which is on one of his earlier holiday albums, A Soulful Christmas. But if you want something that's a nice compilation of like all of the really good hits that he had, what I would recommend is James Brown's Funky Christmas, because it is a compilation of 3 earlier albums. James Brown Sings Christmas Songs, The Soulful Christmas that I mentioned, and then 1970s, Hey America, It's Christmas. You will recognize the album because it is a wreath with James Brown in the middle with a Santa hat on. But yes, James Brown's Funky Christmas, cannot recommend it enough.
Amazing. I also got to go to the theater this past week. The Goodman Theater, which is the big not-for-profit theater here in Chicago, has a new stages program of developmental readings, and I got to see the first pass at a show called Revolutions. This is a musical in development with a book by Zaid Ayers Dorn. Music and lyrics by Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine. For all you 90s folks, it's a story about revolution set on the south side of Chicago. We'll see what happens to it next. You never kind of know how these things are going to play out, but if you ever see this thing come back, definitely worth a look. Revolutions. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. Get your voice heard and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. And that's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on the Support the Team page. Your announcer's Norm Waddell, your creative consultant's Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is Weston Williams. For co-hosts Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, with guest John Relyea, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation while making UNESCO-approved pizza. We're back with an all-new show next week when we take a look back at the best and worst from 2023 in Operaland. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more Red Devils and Sky Blues. Hey, if you get it, you get it. Regardless, join us.